Okay, so you may or may not have seen this book in your in your bookstores in the recent years. It's called Lord Lost by Darren Shan. He also wrote the Cirque du Freak series, and you probably remember the trailer for Cirque du Freak that came out about a year or so ago, and then the movie came out, and then it was the worst, most horrible film adaptation I've ever seen, next to Blood and Chocolate. It's almost as bad as Blood and Chocolate. But that's another topic for another day. Anyway, this is the second series he's written, I believe. It's a 10-book series. This is the first book in it. Lord Lost was originally going to be a standalone book, but Darren Shan decided to prolong it and make it longer. He then decided it was going to go until about 6 books, and then he decided, no, I'm going to make it 10 books. So he did not start this out thinking it was going to be 10 books. That's just how it ended up. And I have to say, this is a masterpiece, just as the Cirque du Freak series was, although in other countries they call it the Saga of Darren Shan. This book starts with Grubbs Grady. Must be some kind of UK humor, I guess, the name. And he's living somewhere in the UK. You know, one thing Darren Shan normally doesn't tell you is where exactly the people in these stories live. So you can kind of imagine them living in your town and your area. I think he does that on purpose. Even in the Cirque du Freak books, he does the same thing. But in this, you know, he's growing up in this town, and, you know, his life is pretty normal. He gets caught smoking cigarettes by his mother. He's in a lot of trouble. And so he finds out that his parents and his sister are going to some opera thing. So his parents say, "Do you want to go, or do you want to stay at your relative's house?" And he was, you know, him being a teenage boy, he was like, "Ew, I don't want to see opera." So he decided to stay at his aunt's house. For whatever reason, he decides to come home. And when he comes home, a whole nightmare of a world comes to light. He comes home to find his family murdered, and if they weren't murdered, they were dying, they were cut in half, they were in the process of dying. He finds it's the most gruesome scene he's ever seen in his life, and while he's there, he sees these demons are still there. He's so freaked out, he tries to run away, and he finds that in that moment he was able to do something amazing. So, this, you know, they're dead. He's in a mental ward for a while. His family members, you know, from all different sides of the family come to see him. They feel terrible, you know, that his family's been murdered, and he's in a mental ward because it was so traumatic. And he sees all kinds of family that consider trying to bring them into their home because he's still a teenager and can't fend for himself. But, you know, they don't end up taking him. Eventually, his uncle comes by, but his uncle actually believes him. So his uncle decides to take him in. And some more interesting things happen. This book, honestly, it took me a while to read this because it wasn't that interesting. Darren Shan is a really great author, but sometimes he has to make a really big foundation. This book was a big foundation, honestly, and it was hard to get through. But considering I've read all 10 books, I would say this is the most boring of the 10 books, but he had to write this in order for it to get to the point where it ended. It's definitely gruesome. If you don't like gore, if you don't like horror, don't read it. You're not gonna like it. I personally like that stuff, and I loved it. Took me a while to read it, but once it was over, I was like, wow, that was interesting. Darren Shan has a way of taking something that is popular and turning it on a whole different level and spinning it around in a way you can't imagine. He did it with Cirque du Freak, and he totally did it with the Demonata series. I haven't read his zombie series yet, but I definitely will, and I can't wait. It's a good read, but ask yourself before buying it, can you take the gore? Can you take it? If no, don't read it. Don't buy it. Don't anything. I give this series 5 out of 5 stars, but this book, a 3. It wasn't that great, but I understand why it couldn't be great, because it's a foundation book. Foundation books usually aren't that great. So, it's it's not that great, but I understand why, and I'm alright with it. But that's it for this one. I'm going to do a review on every single book in this series, and then I'm going to do a review on the entire series as a whole. That will be a really long video, though. Bye!